Hey everybody, this is Dr. Dave Striegel and welcome to the Athletes in Dentistry podcast, learning from sports to enhance your practice. Join me as I talk with Dr. Solomon Cantwell, an accomplished athlete and dentist. From his soccer field childhood to his unique path into dentistry, Dr. Cantwell shares how sports have literally helped shape his career. We'll discuss teamwork, resilience, and how to prevent burnout while achieving clinical excellence. Get ready for some real-life insights and actionable advice from a true dual success story. Let's dive into Dr. Cantwell's passion-filled journey from sports to dentistry. I'm here today with Dr. Solomon Cantwell, who is a very successful dentist in the San Diego metropolitan area, but also is quite an accomplished athlete. Welcome, Dr. Cantwell.
Howdy, guys.
We will probably refer to each other by our first names, and Dr. Cantwell and I have known each other for quite a few years. But we're really here to talk about his experience in not just dentistry, but also in sports as a pretty high-level athlete and competitor, not just years ago in college, but also today. Welcome, and talk to us a little bit about your history in sports and what that journey has been like for you in an athletic endeavor context.
Yeah, I mean, my first memories of as a kid are almost like going down to the field and literally kicking the soccer ball against the wall with my dad, who was, when I was 3 and 4 and 5, he was in the first men's rec soccer league in the Pacific Northwest.
So he was quite a trendsetter in a way.
Yeah, I don't know what got him into soccer exactly, but he was always down at the field and he would drag his sons down, not drag, we wanted to go because it was cool. But yeah, going to see his soccer matches and then going to the pizza joint afterwards to celebrate their victory was some of my first memories as a child. Early on, I wanted to be a professional soccer player until I started playing soccer at 9 and 10. My dad was a coach and I really enjoyed it. And I was good because I was fast. And I've been kicking the soccer ball around for years, but I was just fast. And then 2 years into it, we were losing a lot. And I told my dad, I was like, Dad, you got to play me the whole hour, man. Don't sit me for 15 minutes. 15 minutes, we're not going to be scoring. This is a 10-year-old having this conversation with his coach. I'm coaching rec. Everybody sits. And I was like, you'll have to find a new left forward.
I'm out. This is not what I'm into. I want to win.
He literally said, you can't quit. I'm coaching. This is after the season. And I was like, you can coach my brother, but I'm playing baseball. I started playing baseball at 9 and I must have been horrible, but I loved that sport. And I worked really hard. My dad supported me by going out and throwing the ball every day.
You didn't take it personally when you decided to remove yourself from his team.
He sort of did. He made some comments like, I hate baseball kind of thing. I don't know anything about this, but he would play with me. And my family supported all of the sports I had done at a very high level as much as they could. I played baseball until I was 16 or 17. I had success in track and field and football in high school and college and was on a scholarship for track and field in college. But I had solid D2 speed, not the fastest guy on the planet.
That's important to note, is that as you progress through different levels, your level of talent and skill leads to a certain level of success, and then it doesn't.
Yep.
Unless you are really at the 1% of 1%.
Yeah. And you realize your pecking order in the food chain, because you can't fake 10-2 speed. And if your max is 10-8, you're probably not dropping a second.
No, not when it comes to sprinting like that, right?
In junior high, I wasn't really focused on anything other than baseball in the rec league and toying with some travel ball, I guess is what they would call it nowadays.
Yeah.
But every tournament of any kind of athletics we had at our junior high, I would enter because I just loved playing sports at lunch or whatever. And so I got to know the PE teachers and coaches really, really, really well because I'd always be in the top 3 of whatever we were doing. Badminton, fine. Races, yeah, fine. I would hone in and try and be as good as I could. And one day I remember I did a shuttle run in PE and our football coach was there. He was just timing people. He had no expectations. He knew I was a pretty good athlete, but I shattered the school record in the shuttle run. And Mr. Brown turned into a mentor of mine. And he was such a cool guy. And in 9th grade, I set this record and he's like, Saul, why aren't you running track? Really, he's like, what's wrong with you?
Like a real concern.
Yeah, he's like, why aren't you running track? And why aren't you carrying around a football and scoring touchdowns? That's what he said. And I was like, Mr. Brown, for you, I will run track next year in high school and I'll play football. He changed what I was going to be. And
Just one person who had an interest in you and saw some talent
yeah,
approached you and posed the question. Did you sense the belief he had in you at that point, or was it really just kind of an innocuous question like, why aren't you doing that?
oh, yeah. I think he was almost let down that he had noticed and got me playing football earlier.
Wow.
He's like, how could I have not seen this in this kid who is smashing all of my football players? And we had a big junior high and they're very talented athletes. And then in high school, you start back down at the lowest rung in terms of your competitiveness because you're smaller and maybe not as quick. But I was the fastest kid at my high school. And despite the fact that in my first mock race, I fell flat on my face at the finish line, leaning like I saw Carl Lewis lean.
You got to lean.
You got to lean. And I was trying to beat some like senior and I was just behind him and I was trying to lean and I just stuck to the ground.
Beat up, but
oh gosh, yeah, like a scorpion. And at that point on, it was not Saul Cantwell, it was Saul Faceplant-Well. It was my name in track until I started beating everybody.
Saul Faceplant-Well, I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So high school, I still played baseball recreationally, but started focusing on track and football, mainly track because I was really gifted with speed to some extent.
Yeah.
And started having a lot of success and confidence and really honing in the art of sprinting. That transferred to football just because I was so fast, no one could catch me. Just that kind of speed makes you unique. And I was pretty good in Washington State. I was top 10 sprinter in the state, top 5 maybe, and focused on the 100. But did other things. I really liked the relays, so the 4x1 and the 4x4, which was my weakest race, but most fun because you got to leave everything out on the track. And it was at the end of the meet. It was the last race I ran in high school, and we got 4th in the state with my teammates, and I just loved that aspect of the race. You feel really cool when you smash someone in a 100. You are just fast and you're like, yeah, I'm faster than you, but better contributing to the team. That was high school. And then in college, I redshirted track and field.
And what college did you attend?
The University of Puget Sound, a very small liberal arts school in the Pacific Northwest with a super strong pedigree at the time of cross country and track and field. And by way of their distance runners, track and field, they had won 2 national championships by the time I entered. Their cross country program did. And so the track and field punched way above their weight. Because of those athletes, my coach, Joe Payton, the stadium is now named after him at University of Puget Sound. He was an Olympian and long jumper and sprinter. So he coached jumping. He was such a good motivator and good coach and just knew so much. He had this Southern drawl, and unfortunately, he retired probably when he should have retired because he had brain cancer.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, and so he passed away earlier than he might have. But my sprinting coaches, they were so good, and they were just really adept.
So your sprinting coach was not Joe Payton, right?
No, Joe helped a little bit, but our coach was this guy named Steve. And I don't know what Steve's pedigree was, but he was always there and always willing to take on new guys and just knew sprinting in and out. And he would have us watch these old videos of these crazy roided out Russians and show how they would start. He's like, look at this start. This is amazing. And we would go over film. And so I just really enjoyed the first 3 years of my career and really poured a lot of effort into it. And constantly injured in collegiate sports and track and field in particular. My last 2 years, we got a new coach. Coach Payton retired, and I got fat and lazy. And I didn't really like the coach. Was tired of training and tired of getting injured and let my track and career fizzle out. Certainly the last year, I was over it. After playing a few years of football and ending my last game I played with probably pretty severe concussion, I decided to hang up the football cleats. I was pretty small, and then I hit the weight room and had a growth spurt my redshirt sophomore year, and I went from 155 to 180.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I was just so angry at getting smashed. I still got smashed.
Even at 180, that's still on the small side.
Yeah, I was a slot receiver and going up against very large human beings. Out of self-preservation, not knowing that concussions were bad, was just tired of getting beat to smithereens.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I experienced the same thing when I played football, the concussion side of it. Now looking back, I've probably stayed in it longer than I should have as well.
Yeah. But went from a program in high school with an amazing leader, an amazing team, and just a great system, I think, and went to college and the head coach was bad.
That football you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And I might have stayed in it, but the system was toxic. People talk about toxic workplaces, but this was just like poorly run and the culture was bad. Maybe skipping forward.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. Go there.
It was interesting to see how a good culture could get more out of their mediocre or even good athletes than they should. In a bad culture, you get less out of your athletes than they should be giving.
And why does that happen, do you think? So let's stay on that because it's a natural segue into some of this transition from sports to, in your case, dentistry, right?
Yeah.
So talk more about that distinction you just made.
Yeah, I think a good leader will be able to see the qualities that they need to refine in the people that they're leading. And this could be workplace, or it's certainly prevalent in, let's say, football or track and field, actually, too. The places where that person can succeed the most, they hone the skills that will help that person succeed. And that's what I've seen the coaches and mentors that are really, really good do in sports. And I think in small businesses and probably large businesses too, although I'd have less of a shalt with that, those venues. Yeah. I really like and have studied and listened to the cultures of different teams, the Seahawks, because I'm a Seahawks fan, under Pete Carroll. And I just love the things that he did with culture. And someone like Bill Belichick, Joe Walsh, like those guys weren't just coaches. They were the executive leadership and culture builders to make sure that the people were behind and in their system and believed in their system and fit in their system. And so their players could have success and then their team could have success. And those guys, say what you will about all of them, but their reason why they had so much success. And I think those that are willing to build and recognize the importance of a culture in your business or on a team will do more amazing things that aren't possible with the talent pool that you have, making the whole greater than the sum of the parts.
In sports, I can certainly see there being a connection between someone, like what you were saying earlier, if someone runs a 10-8 or someone only has a certain amount of speed or size or strength, working as a unit with a team of other people, they can achieve things that perhaps they couldn't have on individual levels if just it's one-on-one. How does that translate to a dental team, do you think? Because it's not quite as obvious talent-wise, and you're not running sprints and things like that. Yeah. It's very clear who's more talented. Yeah. So how do you feel like that dynamic of good culture and performance as a team make a difference in the dental world?
I think it's important to realize like whoever you hire, whoever you work with isn't going to be good at everything that you want them to do. Certainly not right away. And they're going to be deficient in some places and talented at some places, or maybe they're just like okay at at everything. But you could have the most intelligent hygienist who's straight A's and they can't have a conversation with a patient without sounding like they're talking down to them. That's going to be a problem in terms of meeting your patient's needs and being successful and filling your schedule. Honing the skills and seeing where you don't need to work on, like I don't need to work on the knowledge base, but we need to work on conversations. Part of our culture is a business of communication.
As it's pretty commonly known in dentistry, you can be a world-class clinician, but yet the patients don't necessarily know that you are unless you tell them. And they don't have a real appreciation for what that means. So success in dentistry, in many respects, is not just your clinical expertise or ability, but also to your point around communication. Can you communicate to patients to have them feel comfortable saying yes to what you're recommending?
Yeah, and establishing those expectations, but also taking the time to coach that person in areas where they're deficient through patience and cultivation. It will build that person up. And maybe they won't ever be like the best whatever, but you can get a lot out of them and they can get a lot out of you by that cultivation and expectations. And if they're not someone that can handle coaching, then they don't fit in the system. All right.
That's what came up in my mind as you were talking about that is hopefully it doesn't happen that often, but I think we both know that it does happen at least occasionally where you have someone, a team member who is very talented. Let's just use your example of the hygienist who is a very strong clinician, very good hygienist from a clinical perspective, but may not take coaching like you would like them to and fit into how you all do things in the office and how this team functions together. How do you approach that person?
I haven't had much success keeping those people on.
Okay.
It just doesn't jive because it's not part of the culture. And I think in the start of my career, I was less nuanced in coaching. And now I think I'm more patient and better and still have plenty of room to grow. But if you meet with these people, if they're picking up what you're putting down, they're trying really hard and they're accepting the feedback. And as long as you're not smashing them down, they're progressing and getting better. But some people have already had their mind made up that their way is the way, and that wouldn't fit on the Seahawks. Like, hey, I'm going to come in and I know Russell has to read here, but I want him thrown to me all the time. That's not how this team works. This team works on a series of reads so that Russell can roll out and read his first 2 reads. And then after that, he's going to make stuff happen. So you better start making stuff happen. Like it's read, make stuff happen. If you just want to be past the ball because you're the fastest and the best and have the best hands, it's just not going to work here. And you're not part of the team. And so I think in the same way where you would see these talented people come through these organizations and they come in and then they're out the same season or right afterwards because the management wants to be like, no, we don't want everyone to know that we just wasted a bunch of money and we're going to let it fizzle out during the off season, like for PR reasons. These same people, they come and then they might not fit in and they go. But the ones that stay there stay an inordinate amount of time because they fit and they value and they're valued to your team. You value their opinion and they value yours. You build the system through expectations and management or coaching or whatever you have and communication. And the players stick around that are successful in the system. And those that don't, they just go away. You know, you often don't even have to like fire these people. They're not picking up what you're putting down. They don't want to be part of it. And they can sense it. They're smart and maybe they fit in a different system.
Well, I think that's what you hope. That conversation with a person like that is, I think, sometimes about fit. And if you can get to the point where you can have a professional, respectful conversation with someone about things are not working the way that either one of us really would like them to work. As a result, I've made the decision to make a change. And I think it's going to be best, not just for the practice, but also for you, because you can find a place where your approach and your style fits better. Let's, for a moment, put a pin in this conversation around the translation of sports to dentistry. And I'm curious as to, you get to the end of your college career, at what point did you know you wanted to be a dentist?
Oh, wow. So I get to the end of my college career and I'm actually pretty listless. Not listless. I was making good money, whatever, as a carpenter, flipping houses. I guess we'll go back to my life is categorized by my profession and what I'm doing and sports. And I was actually in a punk rock band and playing a lot and not really in very many sports. But my friend and I, we weren't doing much except working on houses and watching Jackie Chan videos. And we were like watching Jackie Chan video one day and we're like, dude, let's do some martial arts. And so we threw ourselves into martial arts. And that was the next sports phase of my life as a martial artist. And I still didn't know anything about dentistry. And I went to grad school in Montana to learn how to ski like my wife, my fiance at the time. Like I kind of got into skiing in my 20s and I moved to Bozeman, Montana to learn how to ski. And as an organic chemistry PhD student, actually, I got a lot more skiing done than science. I entered a Taekwondo school that was super challenging and you got to fight a little bit and do these beautiful forms. And I was taking the martial arts that I had known, you know, and been throwing myself at and transferring it to this Taekwondo and also learning a lot about chemistry and science and skiing a lot. There is this synergy between the sports I was doing and the athletics I was doing.
Kind of waiting, giving yourself the space as your career path comes into focus, it sounds like.
Yeah. And the first semester I was at grad school, it was awesome. I was learning so much science. I loved the people that I was with. Bozeman selects for athletic scientists. It was so weird. You put all the freshmen, PhD and master's students in this place called the Bullpen. One of my best friends in school was a professional climber, a rock climber, and an amazing backcountry outdoorsman skier. And so everyone there was skiing or climbing mountains or mountain biking and balancing their life of like pretty rigorous.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we were studying a ton, but we were also skiing a ton. I mean, we were burning the candles at both ends, skiing or climbing or whatever it was we were doing. Then I started research the next year. I started acing my classes in organic chemistry, which was new to me because I was treating it like a job. I was like, I'm going to be really good at this. I'm going to ski my brains out, but I am going to study. And so ace these classes. Then I did my first little bit of research and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in a lab.
That's not lighting the fire for me.
Yeah, I'm not talking to anybody. In fact, the people that I'm talking to that I'm next to are crazy and can't hold a conversation. Like, right, these people deserve to be in a lab. They want to be in a lab. And I'm stuck in the corner running some experiments, wishing I had someone to talk to. At that time, in the peak of ski career, I talked to my buddy who was graduating med school at the time. And my mother and father-in-law, both very avid skiers, were physicians. And so I talked to these guys and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about being like a physician or a doctor or something like that because I'm getting good grades and like it's biology and I'm pretty good at it. And they're like, don't go into medicine. All three of them were like, no one should do this. I was like, really? Because oncology is really cool. Like I love learning about the drugs that people synthesize to help cure cancer or save lives. And my father-in-law, who is an oncologist, is like, it's been a tough road. Wife, like I told her I was thinking about medical school and she started crying.
Your wife did?
Yeah, because her dad is amazing. He's such a smart, good doctor. He was around when he was around, but he was giving everything to his patients too. She was raised with a loving father and he's a great guy and has given so much to his family. But it took its toll on him, telling people that they were going to die, giving so much to them. So she saw that happening with me and was like, no. And then I was like, okay, noted. My buddy was dating a dental student. And he's like, dude, you should check out dentistry because like you get to work with your hands, you get to do some doctory stuff and you don't have to go to residency and be depressed like I'm going to be. I was like, okay. And I didn't know what dentists did because like I just got my teeth cleaned. I'd never had a filling in my life. I had periodontal disease, but I was like, oh, I just go like early because I go a lot and get my teeth cleaned. This is
Just go more often. That's all.
yeah, it's exactly. And I was like, I'm on board. You tell me what to do, I'll do it. And so I had to learn what it was a dentist did. And I had Dr. Woodmansey. We had a clinic at Montana State University, which I was attending so I could learn how to ski and do some science. But we had a clinic that was open and free for all students at the university. Could get their teeth cleaned and a nominal fee or for free.
Wow.
They'd bill your insurance if you had it. You got your teeth cleaned once a year, twice a year. So he was like, yeah, you can come shadow me. And like, I was constantly there. And he's like, dude, you're always here. Why are you here? Maybe you should see some other dentists. And I was like, well, I don't know any other dentists and I don't know what dentists do. And I'm learning a lot and I'm seeing what assistants do, what hygienists do. And so I spent a few hundred hours in that clinic the next semester and had to go back into school, take undergraduate classes to tick boxes because I had skipped over chemistry. I had skipped over physics in my chemistry career because I didn't need it. I took PChem and calculus and had to take some like lower level classes that were kind of ridiculous because I had worked on graduate level projects with the professors and I show up to these classes. They're like, why are you in physics one? You were in a class with me that was chemistry 540 and physics 540. Why are you here? But I had to like humble myself back down and make sure I got A's in these classes because I needed it. So like I had to like circle back around and start refocusing on dentistry. And then I made studying and entering dental school my job after I confirmed through a lot of time volunteering that I wanted to do that career path. And I actually became the president of our pre-medical and pre-dental society that had a couple, like 150 students at Montana State and ran a bunch of fundraisers and was like, this is my job. My undergraduate GPA was so thrashed from sports and lack of focus and being the most difficult major with the lowest GPA in college.
Yep. You had some ground to make up.
I had a lot of ground to make up. I had discovered punk rock, beer, and girls in college. And until my last semester, my junior year, I wasn't very successful grade point wise. I was learning the things I wanted to learn because I thought they were cool, like organic chemistry. I did really well in. Other classes, I couldn't be bothered.
And so as a result, there was not a connection to, I might need a GPA in order to do what I want to do.
Exactly. I was like, oh, whatever. I can get into a PhD program with this GPA, like blah. So I had to start acing classes and I had to study for the dental entrance exam and I had to ace it. And so I made that my full-time job. Still was doing research, but spending a lot of time studying for the dental entrance exam. The other classes were super easy. So like,
Didn't take a great deal of energy to do well in those.
yeah, because I knew the stuff.
Sure. The pace, kind of go through the motions and put the time in.
I was teaching the classes that I was taking. But that dental entrance exam, I had to ace. And I just pretty much destroyed it, which was cool. I needed it to get into school. And I actually was not successful getting placed in my first round. And I knew I was applying to all these top tier schools in the West Coast. And athletics was one of the things that I wanted to do in my off time, knowing I wouldn't have much off time, but they had to have easy access to the outdoors. And all those places are in nice places where people want to live.
They get a lot of applicants.
They get a lot of applicants. And so I was doing martial arts, which is pretty portable, but skiing and rock climbing were the two things that were my passion at the time, particularly rock climbing. I was getting pretty good at it. And my buddy, who I went to grad school with, helped mentor me along in the sport. And my wife and I, Lori, were spending time living out of our Subaru, climbing with some famous people because it was a small community at the time. So it was really cool. I think I climbed with Jimmy Chin twice.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, back when he was living out of his Subaru, I think. So it was a cool time, but I applied to only stout programs except for one, which was UNLV. That was easier to get in, but it was in the heart of rock climbing central. Like I said, I got a bunch of interviews, but that undergrad GPA just destroyed me. I interviewed at a couple places and I was like, oh, I'm not getting in. That's humble pie. The surefire schools were some Boston schools that I had a very good chance getting into. And on the way to the airport, when we were in Bozeman, Lori was driving me to the airport and I looked over at her. I was like, babe, do you want to live in Boston? And she's like, I'll go there for you and your career because it's going to be good for our family that you'll be a dentist. That's what you want to do. And I was like, I don't want to live in Boston. She's like, I don't want to live in Boston. So we canceled all 3 interviews and drove back to town. And so that was my surefire schools. And I gave up on those and I did not get in the first year. I got a call late in the year from UNLV. I think I was waitlisted at University of Washington and University of Minnesota, which was good for someone out of state, but not good enough to get in. Waitlisted at UNLV, and the director of admissions called me on a conference call with the assistant director of admissions and was like, Saul, we really like you. If you move to Vegas right now, we'll let you in. And I was like, just let me in anyway. I'm not moving to Vegas. That's crazy. And they're like, our out-of-state students are full, but we have 3 spots for in-state students. And I was like, look, Dr. Brownstein, that's just too much for me. I'm not moving. I will apply to 2 dental schools next year, and yours will be one, and University of Washington will be the other one. If I get into UW, I'm going to UW because I'm from Seattle. If I get into UNLV and not UW, I'll go to UNLV. Reapplied. It was on the first round of interviews, was let in, and that was it.
That was your entrance and pathway to go to dental school.
Yeah, it was through 2 other careers that I had started. 3 if you count punk rock star.
I wasn't sure that rose to the list.
No. Instruction, property investor guy, PhD in organic chemistry, and then dentist. But sports and athletics was like a big pulling point of my career. I wanted to do the things that I wanted to do physically and outside because it was so important to me.
In conjunction with what you want to do intellectually, it sounds like.
Yeah. And along my path, I have met these folks and they're my friends, but there's not a lot of people that choose both or we'll draw a line in the sand and be like, nah, we're going to University of Kentucky dental school because that's where I got in and I'm going to tough it out for 4 years. I would have. That was my goal, was to be a dentist. The year 3 would have been 50 applications, take what you get.
Okay, good. Because that was going to be my question. Year 1, you didn't get in where you wanted to go.
No.
So you said, okay, I have a plan for year 2. It's UW or UNLV.
Yep.
Had you not gone into either one of those, you were going to throw it against the wall, see what sticks.
Yeah.
And I'll take whatever I get.
Your scores are good for 3 years, and I didn't want to take that test again because it wasn't going to get any better.
Exactly.
You're hard to get better.
So that's kind of your path to dentistry, which is fascinating. And you've been a practicing dentist for how many years?
14 going on 15 years. Yeah, 14 years.
Okay. So almost 15 years. And you've been in a variety of practice settings. One of the questions I have for you, which is unique to you because you've been an associate dentist in multiple places. And this may seem a little out of left field, but I think it does relate to, especially today's environment at the dentist level, with associate dentists who are not owners, but thinking they want to become owners. What do you feel like is the recipe for success as an associate dentist in a practice?
Oh, that's a good question. I think taking ownership of knowing the things that make a practice run, so having a good idea of all aspects of the dental business and dental world, clinical to business, make you a very valuable associate because you know that it's not just doing a little bit of dentistry that keeps the lights on.
Yeah.
It's the lifetime experience of a patient in the practice that makes the practice successful. And that starts with intake and leaves with, hopefully, the patient passing away at 95. Right?
Right.
Yeah. For that long. But yeah, the whole life cycle of the patient. And I think knowing how the business runs, knowing how to facilitate the patient experience and the communication with the patient really makes you a good associate. Taking ownership of your part and assimilating into the system, like we talked about, of the business. And maybe that changes over time in terms of what system you want to be involved in. And I know it has for me, having found, I think, the last place I'll work and be involved in. But I think knowing the business and the clinician make you a good associate. As an associate, I hope to make up for your not having as much goodwill, maybe as the owning doctor or whatever. You better be a really stellar clinician. You better be good at your hands. You better try and be a better dentist than everyone around you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the best dentist in the world, but you need to push yourself to be good and efficient and then know the back end things of what makes the business run. You don't need to be maybe involved in some of those decisions, but you should probably know how much it costs to do some stuff so that you'd have a healthy respect of why an owner might ask you to be more efficient. No owner has ever asked me to be more efficient, but that's not the type of practice we're involved in, but having an idea of what that should look like and having an idea of what it costs to turn the lights on at this place that you're operating.
You mentioned the idea of continuing to improve yourself or grow as a dentist. And I don't know that there's any dental Olympics where we can actually find out who the best is. Just ask somebody, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
But continuing to strive to learn and be curious about what the science is now coming out with and technology, et cetera. That's one of the things that I think knowing about you, I think maybe even you used the word dental nerd.
Yes.
But only with a positive connotation of that, because you learn a certain amount in dental school, but would you say that the real education starts when you get out of dental school? How would you balance someone who's newer than you, you're 15 years in, versus someone who might be a year or two in? How would you balance the need to continue to improve for someone who has differing levels of experience?
Yeah, so I think important for a newer dentist to get some reps at just dentistry to see where you're good, where you're deficient. You're not fast, you're not good. I thought I was fast and good. And I am neither in those because I don't have enough reps. I've only done 20 of these procedures. Now I've done 10,000 of the things that I had done 10 of, crown preparations or whatever. Like, you're not fast and good. You're slow and bad. and just having that humility to be like, okay, I need to like learn the craft, and then learn the craft for however long it takes, like a year or 2 years, while kind of staying up to date on some things. The stuff you learn in dental school is not going to be obsolete yet. You haven't learned anything advanced, but you've learned some of the more modern-ish stuff. You don't know anything special because you have to go seek that out, but you're more up to date than all the other dentists around you in terms of the science and maybe some of the theory behind what you're doing. Getting some reps on just the normal everyday dentistry, I think, is super important. And then seeing where your passions take you in terms of the things that you like to do. I used to have way too much money on continuing education. So maybe I'm a bad example.
And not the only one in that boat, I can assure you.
I had to like cut myself off, but I've spent half of someone's retirement on all the classes, and you can do it cheaper probably. But yeah, finding what tickles your fancy, right? Like what floats your boat, kind of diving into that. Yeah, I think it's important to take the skills that you learn in dental school and hone the procedural, how to talk to patients, how to drill on a tooth, how to do a filling, making sure things don't hurt on patients, and then looking at the other avenues that you might be good at and that you can add to your dental tool belt. Because it's not infinite. You can't be good at everything, but you should take pride in the things that you really like to do. And if you're like, I love fillings, well, then get really good at the story of composite fillings. And like, that is not me.
One of the topics that I picked up on through our conversation is one of humility. And you've been very honest with some of the instances in your pathway to where you are now that have been quite humbling. You just mentioned a moment ago that you need to continue to be humble in order to remain curious and growing.
Definitely being liked by your team and supported by your team. I mean, you can kind of approach it different ways. You can be the dictator, or you could be someone that's willing to take input from your team and the people around you and the patients as well. I am pretty confident in my handling of patients, and that's what they want, and that's how you could be successful. But if something doesn't go the way that you want it to go, or the way that it should even, then being humble to ask for the forgiveness of the patient if you hurt them or whatever, like not brushing it to the side, willing to be better by listening to their input. I mean, I'm not going to choose a composite brand because some patient thinks it's the brand that they should use, but I certainly will listen to their input on their experience to try and make my team better. But also, I think really the team behind you being humble enough to listen to them and confident enough to direct them. But it takes humility to listen to their input, because a lot of people, dentists and doctors and high performers, think they might know everything about every aspect of the business, and they simply don't. There's not enough time. You don't know how to negotiate with insurance companies. You don't know how to load the sterilizer in the most efficient manner because you don't do it every day, dude. I think they do. Taking these little aspects of the business and listening to the team and being humble enough and occasionally even self-deprecating to help loosen the tightness around your business and being a doctor or whatever. Like, I think those are all important skills, and it makes my life a lot easier. And I don't think I was very humble when I started. I wasn't like brash and a jerk, but I think I was pretty hard to work with, judging by the amount of people that were assisting me. And so I had to learn that was an important trait. But sports teaches you to be humble in many ways, unless you're just like Usain Bolt and you never lose and you set the world record and it's not going to be broken.
Well, there's one of those, though. There's one
guy.
The rest of us are fighting it out, trying to figure out how to get the most out of ourselves. You end up having to rely on others in order to accomplish goals, right? Because that's what dentistry is all about in the end, is how you and your team work together to be able to deliver a great experience for your patients.
Mm-hmm.
And the humility to be able to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and listen to your team if they're telling you, Doc, you're turning patients off. Oh, really? How? A lot of people aren't willing to ask how yet. So one of the things that I know about you also, and I'm retracing our steps a little bit, you've mentioned that sports has always been a constant for you in your life, and you've made it a priority, perhaps more so than many.
Yeah. For sure.
to be part of your day-to-day, week-to-week existence. What do you do now that really lights your fire from a sports perspective?
So I have been racing and training race bikes, pedal bikes, for 6 or 7 years. Someone gave me a bike when I moved to San Diego, which was very nice of him. One of my good friends, because he wanted someone to ride with.
Okay, there you go. So there was a selfish part to it.
Oh yeah. And I went on one bike ride and I was like, this is awesome. I get to eat like everything that I want and I'm having fun. It's like fast hiking. I've morphed the last 15 years since I've been in San Diego into a bike rider. I was like a weekend warrior kind of guy, just having fun, staying fit and using it as a fun social event. And then 6 or 7 years ago, there's this ridiculous bike race called the Belgian Waffle Ride. And my buddy, who is a adept cyclist, was like, Saul, you should do this. This is the hardest race in America. And I was like, hardest race in America? I'll do that.
That's right up my alley.
Perfect. And I did it so slow. I did it with a buddy who thought it was a bad idea, but it turns out he's very adept at this type of racing. And he's now my training partner also. But yeah, I race road bikes and my goal, there's different types of cycling, but winning a national championship as a masters racer is a big feather to put in your hat. And so spend a lot of time on the bike and have eliminated decision-making in my life to facilitate training for that.
Training opportunities and time. So you've really limited the things you're doing besides your career, obviously, and your family. So if you're not either at work or at home with, your wife and son, you're on the bike.
Yeah. There's other things that I do and that I'm passionate about, but that is a main area of focus.
Punk rocker. I mean, come on. You've got to have some musical or creative.
I'm staring at 4 guitars right now in the foreground here. But riding bikes, I was gifted in my 20s with really good speed. And many of these races end in a sprint if you're there at the end. One of my coaches and friends said, unless you cross the finish line in a solo breakaway, you are a sprinter. And so every bike race, other than a time trial where you're just like on your own clock, every bike race ends in a sprint. And that's fascinating. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be good at that. So the ultra endurance event I do because they're fun and not because I'm particularly good is gravel racing, which is a road bike you ride on the dirt. And
that sounds dangerous to me, like riding a road bike on gravel.
And the cars are a little bit wider.
Okay.
You're underbiked for sure.
Okay.
But the road racing, like the Tour de France type of racing, I think I'm quite a bit better at. Because if it ends in a sprint and I'm still there, I'll probably do pretty good.
You've got your shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly cycling is convenient because you can get lumped into different age groups. Although I have raced against pros and sometimes do, I am not in contention with them as they're young and strong. But against the other guys that I race against, I'm pretty adept at, or getting better for sure.
And do you have a national ranking now?
Yeah, I entered a gravel race, the gravel national championship. I finished like 15th. So
outstanding.
That's solidly mid-pack, by the way. I don't know if that makes me 15th in the country, but I showed up.
You finished?
I did finish, which was very difficult. But I am still learning the craft of racing. I won my first race and haven't won a race since then in 3 years.
Well, I'll tell you what, of all of them to win, the first one's probably like, okay, I got a little taste of it. Now I'm climbing again.
I actually thought I was going to win a bunch more, but it is so hard as you go up in these categories of racing. You start racing more adept people. Many of the guys were former professionals, current professionals, or national champions themselves. And so you start racing against those guys and you stop winning a lot.
Well, and okay, so this is a great topic, the outcome versus the process. So when I hear you say that, I hear you talking about, yeah, if I was just outcome driven, I thought I was going to be winning a bunch of these things. And so that'd be like a feather in my cap. Yep, that's another one. That's another one. I'm good at this. But if you were base your assessment of yourself solely on the outcome or the results, maybe the information or the assessment's a little different. Apply that to dentistry. How does that concept of being outcome versus process driven apply to your work as a dentist, do you think?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Very seldom are you going to do everything absolutely right. I mean, you get an occasional time where God shines his light down and everything is roses, right?
Oh, the heavens open.
But not everything is going to go perfect every single procedure. So looking for opportunities to improve, viewing that experience as a learning experience and not beating yourself up at all over a less than perfect outcome. If you beat yourself up every time something didn't go well, you're going to go crazy because nothing goes perfect. And so my favorite cyclists, when I watch professional cyclists or myself, like you lose so many more races than you win. It's not like football where like a good team's 12-2. You lose all the time because there's 100 dudes who are about the same level as you and they want to win too, all of them. And so your win percentage is like 5%. That's amazing. You like walk away with a couple wins a year as a cyclist.
That's really fascinating that a 5% win rate in the world of cycling is world class. You are top of the top. In dentistry, and it's a little bit harder to assess win versus loss in dentistry, but maybe it's patient satisfaction, growth in the practice, things like that. Doesn't always go the way you'd hoped. And we've certainly seen that a lot in the last few years, in particular since COVID. So you're obviously a highly competitive athlete even today. How is that foundation helping you now in your role as an associate dentist in a practice?
I was talking to my cycling coach friend and patient, and I was like, hey, I'm going on this podcast with one of my mentors and friends, Dave. I kind of talked to him about this exact question, and I was like, I think it's the grit involved in clocking back in after whatever outcome it is, rejoicing if it's a good one, being like whatever if it's a bad one, punching the clock and going back and doing the same thing again with intention of trying to make yourself a little better every single time. Athletes and dentists have this and physicians have this because they have a goal, whether it's just to become a dentist or to get into a certain practice, but you have this goal and then you can outline a plan with distinctive steps to get to the goal. And sometimes someone else has outlined the plan, so it's just plug and play. And sometimes you have to invent your own, but that grit required to step into the plan is essential. If you don't have it, you're just not going to do it. You're going to fail somewhere along the line. Someone is going to put a roadblock. It's tough when there is the Usain Bolts of the world in dentistry who have never had anything bad happen. And then they get to a procedure, they shit the bed, and the outcome is horrible. They are crushed, just abjectly crushed. And you're like, that's the first time that something bad happened? Oh man, you've had a good life.
As you curled up in the fetal position?
Yeah. Whereas for me, I'd be like, yep.
Another day at the office.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is, and I don't believe you're making light of making mistakes, but when you also do more complex dentistry, would it be fair to say that you open yourself up to more failures?
Oh, for sure. The level of complexity of the case, there's more room for error by the nature of the procedures that you're doing or the procedure algorithm that you're following. When you do exciting, in my mind, exciting dentistry, you can fail. Managing the outcomes and expectations of the patient will help you a lot. You don't seek for that failure for sure. When it happens, you have to go about your business. You got to clock back in the next day and do your stuff, right? Like you can't just be like, I'm done because like this didn't happen. Now you can choose to not do those procedures if the outcome is repeatedly the same. Like then that's like, hey, maybe you're just not good at it.
Nice. And that's probably a wise decision in that case, because we know that in general dentistry in particular, general dentists have the option to do a lot of types of cases.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of crossover there. And I think that's when sometimes a general dentist may cross over into an area that maybe they're not as confident in and find themselves a little bit in over their head. But I find that that notion of failure and not always getting the result that you want is one of those things that translates from sports to dentistry.
Yeah.
And to your point, how do you still have the grit and the willingness to clock back in the next day and not let today's patients feel that failure or that sense of disappointment?
Yeah.
Perhaps you felt even the previous hour.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with making that transition from things did not go well, but yet I've got Mrs. So-and-so coming in 10 minutes and I've got to be in a different headspace for her?
Yeah, I think maybe dentistry or happy dentists are selected for by their just ability to compartmentalize and move on to the next task and not tear yourself up. Those that are prone to that don't have a very fulfilling career and maybe don't last as long. I just can't imagine not having that ability to compartmentalize and just put a period or a parentheses around the thing that you did. If the outcome wasn't perfect, you got to go try again. Like, it produces anxiety in me talking about someone that is like that, because I'm like, oh gosh, it cannot be.
Right. Yeah.
They're out there. They're sure out there. I just think that they don't last very long in dentistry in general. Or if they do, they're just like, no one wants to be around them. They're producing this iffy experience. So many dentists are good at like moving on to the next thing, I think.
They kind of self-select in a way, what we were talking about with different levels of sport. If you are used to only winning or only being the best one, then pretty soon you're going to run into a level that you aren't anymore. And do you have anything else to rely on and dig into that's going to keep you showing up? It sounds like that's the same thing in dentistry.
Yeah, I think all aspects of dentistry, there's that. I don't want to call it thick-skinned, but that's also maybe part of it. I've worked with dentists, and dentists have worked with me. I think that it weighs heavy in trying to talk to these people and mentor them. Hey, don't let it weigh so heavy on you. It's easy to say.
It is. It's a skill I think that takes time to develop.
Yeah.
So I've really, really enjoyed our conversation today, and we're going to wrap up on what I call the 2-minute drill. And that's kind of a play on football, but also dentistry. And so I have a clock that you can't see, but it has 2 minutes on it.
All right.
And I'm going to ask you some off the wall or maybe some unexpected questions. And I just want the first thing to come to your mind. And then this is how we'll wrap up. Okay. So the clock is starting. All right. So first of all, what's your favorite healthy snack?
Protein shake.
Okay. Excellent. You have a favorite sports movie?
Rudy.
Would not have expected that one. What's your favorite sports memory?
Scoring a touchdown in the last minutes of a football game when I was a senior, the first game, and just being carried off the field.
Senior in high school?
Yeah.
Awesome. What would you consider to be the most challenging part of balancing dentistry and athletics in being a competitive athlete that you are?
You have to say no to people all the time.
Okay. Excellent.
Challenging.
If you could go to dinner with an athlete, any athlete, who would it be?
That's such a good question. I would probably go with a cyclist named Wout van Aert. I think he's such a cool guy. He's like a rock star to me.
He's a current cyclist?
Very good. There's not very many people like him. And he's a family man too. I appreciate that.
Actually, I love that answer. What's your go-to pump-up song for a big game or a procedure?
Rooster by Alice in Chains.
Again, I would not have predicted that. What sport do you think is most like dentistry and why?
I think being on a football team is most like dentistry.
Why?
The team aspect of the sport, I just always refer in my brain. I'm like thinking about like the culture of a business and culture of a small team. And I just feel like there's so many analogies one can make.
That concludes our 2-minute drill. And that also concludes our conversation with Dr. Solomon Cantwell, who is a successful 15-year dentist in the North San Diego County area. Thank you very much, Dr. Cantwell, for joining us. And it's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Look for the Athletes in Dentistry podcast wherever you find your podcasts. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.